During the morning of February 19, 1943, while Hitler was meeting with Manstein in the German Field Marshal's headquarters in Zaporozhye, a notice arrived that a Soviet tank brigade had been detected about 60 kilometers from there. This was the result of the Soviet breakout west of the source of the Meuse River, which threatened to cut off and annihilate the entire German 1st Panzer Army, along with other Wehrmacht formations. Faced with this danger, the German leader's advisors recommended that he leave there as a precaution, and at about 1:45 p.m., Hitler boarded his plane and returned to his East Prussian headquarters. This is the event that, somewhat exaggeratedly, we are told was Hitler's most dangerous moment, because he could have been taken prisoner by the Soviets. But is this true? Did Stalin really have any intention of capturing the German leader? Was this Hitler's most dangerous occasion, when he was closest to the enemy? Next we are going to answer all these questions, and we will see how the last thing Stalin wanted was to capture Hitler, until his armies reached Berlin. First, let's turn to the question of whether or not Hitler really came close to being captured. It should be noted that the column of Soviet tanks was about 60 kilometers from there, and that to reach it they would still have needed many hours if they really headed there in a straight line and without stopping. Although neither Hitler nor anyone in the German high command knew it, the truth is that the Soviets had no idea that Hitler was there, much less was his goal. Another thing they did not know was that the Soviet tanks had run out of fuel, and that shortly after being detected they had to stop. Within days, this Soviet unit was left isolated after Manstein's counteroffensive during the late winter of 1943. This tells us that Hitler was never remotely close to being captured, nor was this the Soviet plan. After clarifying this first point, let us now ask ourselves why Stalin never wanted Hitler captured, and even became interested in the health of the German leader in the final stages of the conflict. Making a small paragraph here, and for us to understand the issue, we have to comment on a curiosity. This happened when a Japanese delegation visited Mao Zedong's Communist China, once World War II ended. During this event, the Japanese politician apologized to Mao on behalf of Japan for the recent invasion, to which the Chinese leader replied not to worry, because thanks to that invasion he had been able to triumph in China and gain control of the country. This anecdote helps us to get an idea of the interests that Stalin had during the final phase of the Second World War. And it is that although when the Germans attacked the Soviet Union and threatened Moscow, the government of Stalin was put in danger, later everything would change. Once the Germans were contained and the Soviets moved into a general counterattack in the summer of 1943, Stalin realized that a great opportunity was opening up for him to seize as much European territory as possible. This objective made the Soviet leader take a series of decisions, which made the war last longer than it would have been necessary, if his intention had only been to overthrow Hitler's government. Instead, he entertained himself by taking secondary targets in the Balkans and countries like Austria, Hungary, or Czechoslovakia, in which he wanted to establish his power. Because of this, Stalin was interested in Germany not signing peace and remaining active in the conflict until the end. For this he needed Hitler in command, or in any case, that Germany did not sign any surrender until the Red Army reached Berlin. It is possible that this information surprises many, but it is corroborated by many testimonies of the Soviet leader that we will analyze in depth in a live program soon. On the other hand, and even if we get off the subject, let's take the opportunity to comment that the United States was not interested in an early peace either, because let's not forget that its economy did not fully recover until its country got involved in the war, from which became the first world power at all levels. You can also see how with each news that the war was going to end, the U.S. stock market suffered sharp declines. This occurred mainly during September 1944, and in March 1945 when they crossed the Rhine. Let us remember that seen from the coldest possible point of view, war is above all a business, and an opportunity to gain political influence. And finally, Germany was not going to sign any peace either, since it did not want to accept the unconditional surrender that the Allies imposed on it since the end of 1942, and because it was trying until the end for a division between the Allied bloc that would allow it to survive. Once this point has been explained, in which we have seen how no country was seeking immediate peace, And since deep down everyone was interested in the war continuing, let us see the occasions in which Hitler could have died or been taken prisoner. In the first place, and as you all know, it is estimated that Hitler suffered some 42 assassination attempts during his entire career, the strongest of which occurred on July 20, 1944 at his East Prussian headquarters. This, as usual, made the German leader obsessed with his safety. Precisely, the barracks of the Wolf's Den was equipped with enormous security, and the main concern they had was the attack of a Soviet paratrooper commando. Curiously, no external attack was ever carried out, but the one carried out by the Germans themselves was. After that attack, Reimer took over the security of the barracks, and reinforced it even more. In addition to this famous episode, and the one we discussed at the beginning of the program in February 1943 on the Eastern Front, Hitler had two other moments of great danger. The first was on the Western Front when he was meeting with Rommel on June 17, 1944. This meeting took place in a complex of bunkers he had in Margeville, about 90 kilometers northeast of Paris, near the French town of Soissons. While the meeting was taking place, notice was received that a group of Allied bombers had been detected in the area and the meeting had to be suspended. Later, a German V-1 rocket fell near the area by mistake, and Hitler along with his entourage were convinced that it would be better to leave the place and return to Germany. A few months later, already in March 1945, Hitler also took a risk and paid a visit to the troops on the Oder front, placing himself just 10 or 12 kilometers from the Red Army, and of course within range of their artillery. It is evident that as the war became more against Germany, the risk to assume had to be greater and greater. Once the Soviets reached the banks of the Oder River, and Berlin was only 70 or 80 kilometers away, Stalin did set the capture of Hitler as one of his objectives, this being the first time he had done so. The purpose of this was to be able to get him under his control, so that he could not play any kind of role in a future confrontation between the Soviet Union and the Western Bloc. For his capture, Stalin sent a special command that would act on its own and that was not under Zhukov's orders, since not even the Soviet Marshal himself was aware of this. Ultimately, they were unable to capture Hitler, and this special Soviet group soon found out what had happened and so reported to Stalin. However, the Soviet leader continued as if he knew nothing by asking Zhukov what had happened to Hitler. Zhukov would later comment in his memoirs that when he found out about this, he felt completely cheated and even embarrassed. After having analyzed all these events, we can conclude that to say that Hitler was about to be captured in that meeting with Manstein in February 1943 is quite an exaggeration, and that the most dangerous situations in which he was seen were by his own band. In addition, and as we have explained, there was never any intention of capturing him or killing him by the Allies, until that same month of April 1945. And so far this program, in which I wanted to talk about this subject that is so attractive but that in reality lacks any real basis. If you want to delve into the dangerous situations in which Hitler found himself, I leave you in the description the program about Manstein's counteroffensive in Kharkov, the one about the meeting with Rommel after the Normandy landings, and the one about the last visit he made to the Eastern Front in March 1945. Thank you all for being a part of this community, and especially the sponsors who make this possible. Subscribe and share this program if you liked it, and see you in the next one. See you soon.